if I could ask everybody to sit down so we could start with the closing keynote for the day and try to be pretty much on time. Okay. Thank you. Today I have the great pleasure of presenting our closing keynote speaker, Chad Weinard. Chad is a technologist and a digital strategist for museums. He currently manages digital initiatives at the Williams College Museum of Art, including WCMA Digital, which is a 3-year project to enhance engagement through digital collections and data at the museum. His background is in the history of modern and contemporary art, where he studied at the Institute of Fine Arts in New York City at NYU, and interaction design, which he studied at the Interactive Telecommunications program at NYU. His work explores a variety of areas, from collections to cultural data, to museum infrastructure, to creative technology, and the intersection of digital humanities and data science. He's led the development of mobile, web, social video, and in-gallery experiences at the North Carolina Museum of Art, as well as a number of other museums through the Balboa Park Online Initiative. Many of you know of Chad if you're in the museum technology field, or you know of his work that he posts on Medium, the online publishing platform. These posts often address issues in the cultural heritage community, and although they're written as a narrative, they have a sense of poetry and a style that suggests letters written to a knowing and empathetic friend. They engage and they challenge and they provoke and they rebuke, all at the same time, so I highly recommend them to you. They are delightful and engaging reads. And I ask you now to join me in welcoming Chad.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. It is a thrill to be here. Oops. There we go. I feel like so much of what I want to share with you today is in summary an exclamation point to what we've heard already, which is super exciting for me. Oop. This is the Williams College Museum of Art, also called WICMA. In the front lawn is an installation by Louise Bourgeois called Eyes from 2001. Williams is a small school with a big reputation for infusing art throughout the curriculum. It may be an art historian's paradise. Did I mention it's small? This is a comparison of collection size. WICMA has about 15,000 works of art meant to teach and inspire. We try to use small to our advantage, though. WICMA uses its collection in really interesting ways. This is showing a comparison with the Smithsonian collections and the science items in particular, which we'll get to. WICMA Digital. I'm directing a 3-year grant-funded project lovingly called WICMA Digital. Our goal is to activate the collection using digital tools and approaches. For the next few minutes, though, I'd like you to follow me down a rabbit hole. Last month, I discovered a set of Smithsonian photographs that amazed me and made me think about my own work in new ways. This is probably well known to this crowd. This is Chip Clark's Vertebrate Biology, birds. Chip Clark was a longtime photographer at the National Museum of Natural History. The first time I saw this photo was in the writing of Professor Stephen Lubar, and it set off a mad chase for me. There's something about the density of this picture, the rush of perspectival lines down the center gives a sense of scale. It gives a sense of enormous opportunity. This is Chip Clark's view of the Botany Collection. There's a thrill of being behind the scenes in these photos. This has an all-over focus. It's almost a tactile feel to it as you see the botany samples laid out before you, seed pods bits of trees, leaves spread apart, all in racks. There's a thrill of being behind the scenes in these photos. This is Invertebrate Zoology from 2009. You can see the shells, the starfish, the coral, octopus on the right there as well. I was somewhat late to discover this. As usual, I was late to the party. This is a screenshot that was captured in 2016. You can see a little bit of the activity of this page. It is no longer live on the web, but it shows Chip's work from this series in glorious detail. In 2016, this series of photographs got quite a bit of notoriety as well from design magazines. These were mentions that called to attention to a public audience and to a design audience and to an art audience the richness of these collections and the fascination of the compositions themselves. I would love to use these pictures as ways into some of the concepts we've been talking about today. These 4 ideas came to my mind as I looked through these photos, and I would love to look through these pictures and talk about them. The first one is open. This is the Anthropology Collection. Every drawer is outstretched. You wonder how they can possibly reach across the aisle. There's no space of floor to be seen. The drawers actually meet in the middle. The shoes, you'll notice down here, it kind of invite you in. They're where your feet might be as you enter the picture. There are figurines, the snowshoes, halfway down the middle as well. You almost feel like you can enter into this picture through the fabric, the textiles, and the textures. And again, there's this amazing perspectival whoosh going back into the center of the picture. There are people back there as well, in and amongst the collections. And we'll get back to them in just a little bit. This sense of scale, of volume, of amazing content behind the scenes made me think a little bit of this picture, which comes up, I'm sure, every so often at the Smithsonian. This is a film still from Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is in the famous last scene as they're putting the Ark back into the archives. This sea of boxes, again with this perspectival line going back into a horizon off into the distance, giving you the sense of endlessness. And in this case, the crates are closed, aren't they? They're tucked away. They're never meant to be opened again. And this was a sense that Chip was actually pushing against. I put this in here. This is an Instagram photo that I took of WICMA's own new storage facility. Again, almost a foreboding sense of the endless capacity for storage. But I would offer that Chip's approach of opening up the cabinets, of opening up the collections in a visual way, pushes against this. And this is the Mineral Sciences collection from 2009. Again, the sense of a riot of color. Every cabinet open. There's an ache and eagerness to open up the collections, to show the whole collection, and to make it available. This struck me certainly, and we've seen parallels to it today and mentions of it as well, to the idea of opening up the data, opening up our collections for others to use. At WICMA, our first task was to open up the cabinets of our databases and make our data public. There was no marketing campaign, there was no communications team, there wasn't a year-long strategy. In fact, we had some computer science professors who were desperate to use the collection data. And so instead of picking and choosing which parts of the collection data we might offer and make public, it was easiest to put it all up on GitHub. It was important that we shared all of the data to give a sense of the whole collection. We shared the data before it was perfect, before it was publishable, before it was ready. This was opening up our digital shelves. This was also an approach to improve our data. The sooner the data was out there, the sooner we'd get feedback on it, the sooner we would hear how it was being used, the sooner we'd be able to incorporate those stories into improving the data. We offered the data in very simple formats. This is a CSV file, JSON files for the more advanced CS students, and a GraphQL API for those in advanced programming classes. That CSV file, that is our lingua franca. That is the one, we talk about the maintainability and sustainability of our work. What is it going to look like in 10,000 years? That CSV file is the one that I imagine will stay. It is the one, like the text file we talked about earlier, that is the one that I imagine looking at down the road. We opened our images as well, and for a collection of 15,000, we had a fair number of high-quality images, but we opened them all. We wanted people to see the whole collection. Some of the images aren't that great. Some date back to the museum's first 2-megapixel camera, but all of them are useful in some way. We offered a complete set of collection thumbnails as a downloadable zip file. This is especially useful for computer science students who are doing visualization, where they can point to a directory of files, a directory of images, and make something useful right away. All of this is so you can see and use the whole collection. So not long after we opened our data and our images, we started a collaboration with the computer science department. We called it Pink Art. 5 computer science students developed 5 very different algorithms to rank the collection by its pinkness. This is a visualization of the collection with pink highlighted. The collection, you might say, through rose-colored glasses. And this is the resulting exhibition. At WICMA, we explored digital ideas in physical spaces and objects. The students discovered that writing code is creative writing. And the museum discovered that there's no one way to measure pink. Another thing that we discovered, and I mentioned recycling the information from how the collection data is used, we discovered that scale is super important to how you see an object as pink. A small pink object is very different from a big pink object. So in response to this, we added dimension data to our data set. So not long after we opened our data and images, So this is creating. So let's continue looking at Chip Clark's work, now with an eye toward artist interventions. This is the Paleo Biology Collections in 2006. Chip kept this deep view, but now this arabesque of tusks makes its way across the image. You won't be surprised to hear that Chip painstakingly posed these photos. He moved artifacts, he swapped drawers and shelves. You'll notice the giant tooth up front, the fossils that fill the front field of view, and he kept clear this time the central median so that you could see the scope of the storage collections behind. This is the Botany Collection from 2006. You can see the yellow and the green posed next to each other with coral in between and the open box of mysterious and wondrous slides in between, all posed and color coordinated, complementary colors coming to the fore. We mentioned before putting our images on the floor. Chip's aesthetic gesture of ordering those natural history collections has a parallel in art history as well. This is an image of André Malraux and his Musée Imaginaire, where he too mixed and matched styles and cultures and museum images from around the world, across geographies, to find synergies and connections between them. This is the immersive art installation called All at Once, and this is just opening at WICMA this week. This is by the artist group studio, The Green Isle. This is an artist's view of WICMA's collection, based on our data and images. Studio The Green Isle had the idea to fill the walls with the collection. It's actual wallpaper, so there's a tangible physical element to the installation. This is a working sketch, which gives you an idea of how the works of art are ordered. This, again, goes back to the last talk. These are ordered by visual similarity. And so this is not how one of our curators would have imagined the collection. But you can see in this, just a preliminary sketch, how groups of the collection are brought together. There's a swath of objects down below. They form almost a platform. You'll see often to the left, there's a circle of portraits that blend together. Some of our American Impressionism is off to the left there. And you see this island of hard-edge, very colorful geometric abstraction as well. Layered on top of this is an augmented reality experience that calls out some of the connections that are on the wall. Connections that are inherent within the collection data itself, but also that have been brought to the fore by how the collection has been used. So we talked about how dimensional data can be mapped into two-dimensional space. This is another project by the studio The Green Isle, to map that dimensional data into one-dimensional space. So here that one dimension is time. The algorithm is finding similarities among our collection and laying them out in time. The amazing thing about this is that the algorithm clearly saw our Andy Warhol portraits, said they should be together, and then also linked them to some early American works, but also some surrealist works that we would never have thought of on our own. There is certain precedent for bringing artists into the conversation. This is Charles Wilson Peale, a self-portrait, the artist in his museum, lifting the curtain to the collections behind. Again, even some of the similar visual tropes, the perspectival lines going off into the distance. To his credit, there's a family behind them, so this is going to the collection as a social experience. And there's a natural history element as well. There's a turkey in the front. Browsing. So being able to see the whole collection, but in a certain sense to be able to see it without the intervention of someone else, without the artist holding up the veil, was something that we've been thinking about a lot as well. You get a sense of this in Chip Clark's vertebrate biology, birds. So this is the staff team actually handling and going through the collection. An amazing sense of what we would all love to be able to do, right? To be able to sort, to make our own collections of the collection, to actually have physical hands on the wonder and beauty of the collection. This made me think, what small aspect of this could we translate to a web-based experience? So very similar to what the Yale lab, DH lab has been doing. We've been experimenting with interfaces which might allow a non-specialist audience, someone who might not know exactly what terms to put in a search bar to find a work of art, who might not be versed in words like impressionism or abstraction, but might be able to see the collection spread out before them and find works of art that might be useful to them. This is a view of our collection, again organized by visual similarity. This is all 15,000 works of art. You can see a line of metadata up above that can sort and filter this view. And you're able to zoom right in and see these islands of objects and colors and get closer and closer. This is a similar patch to what I was talking about in the All at Once exhibition, where we have these Andy Warhol Polaroids up and against the early American portraits, and in between is kind of an odd area of surrealist faces, which I just love. Figurines, a really bright and beautiful spot in the constellation of Egyptian figurines. And here's a little taste of that sort of interaction of dipping into the sea of images, clicking and getting a little bit more of that information all the way up into a high-resolution view. And a timeline view as well. We're very interested in allowing the collection to be seen as something that grows and evolves over time. This sorts those images into when they came into our collection. And so researchers and even our own curators can get a sense of the dynamic properties of our collection. And so one last element I'd love to talk about with respect to Chip's work is the idea of connection and people and how we connect our collections to people. This, as I said, this is vertebrate zoology, birds. Again, this rush of perspective, the open cabinets, amazing color. Each of the images by Chip Clark that you've seen includes people. Each includes a staff member. Each includes someone who's passionate about that collection, and this is no different. This lady in bright blue, which I love, surrounded by bird specimens, is Roxie Laybourne. She started in taxidermy, painstakingly mounting specimens, all the while becoming an expert in the feel, the characteristics of individual bird species. And I have to recommend the podcast Side Door, which is a Smithsonian production, has a wonderful episode on Roxie and part of the story I'm about to tell. This is Eastern Airlines Flight 375. This flight went down after takeoff in Boston. It was a horrible crash. It was one of the worst crashes up to that time, and this is 1960. The airlines was desperate for answers to this. It was all in the press. They, in their desperation, sent feather samples to the Smithsonian to try to get a sense of what happened to this flight. Roxie Laybourne drew upon her expertise and developed a method for identifying samples, and she would compare them to the collection amidst 5 other steps. It turned out that a murmuration of starlings brought down Flight 375. Roxie's work with the collection led to new safety procedures at airports, safer engines, and actually safer aircraft design, and more. There won't be another Roxie, but at WICMA, we're eager to help others make new use of the collection. This is a special gallery called the Object Lab, where we invite faculty to use objects from the collection to teach. Here's another view. We can see individual sets of objects. Over here, there's a bright colored set for a neuroscience class. There's a single painting in the back that's used in a math class. What's unique is that we're not teaching art history with this object lab. We're not teaching art history with these works of art. The neuroscience professor uses objects, and especially the brightly colored ones, as we see here, to teach neuroscience concepts. And ditto for math and stats and biology. We pride ourselves in being able to connect the collection to nearly every field of study. For us, connectivity and engagement is hands-on and personal. We know which objects may turn a student who has to write a 30-page term paper into a scholar who writes a 100-page passion project and whose direction is changed forever. and I'm talking about this fellow in particular. This was an exhibition curated by an anthropology class where students were given the responsibility for doing research on objects themselves. We can experiment with deep connection and engagement at WICMA, partly because we're small. This is a photo from the Walls program. Students are encouraged to select a work of art from the collection and to live with that work of art in their dorm room for a semester. At the end of the term, the student reflects on the experience in a journal that stays with the artwork. Each work of art carries a rich, qualitative account of its life and impact on students. And we have these journals digitized. When the collection is used, new stories and new context is generated. We work to attach that as data. And then we share those new connections to spark new use. There's a lot to turbocharge this cycle, and a lot that we've heard over the course of yesterday and today. There are more new ways to augment the data. Things like rapid capture, 3D scanning, gigapixel capture. We talked about artificial intelligence, machine learning tags, and computer vision. All of this can be added to our collection data. And we have new ways, too, of sharing the knowledge we have and this new context. Everything from AR and VR, which we talked about a good bit today, all the way through social media and data visualization. I've brought up the idea of in-gallery and artist immersive projects, and web and mobile as well. These are sparkly and new, especially on either side of the equation. Where we have a problem and a little bit of a thorn in the side, and I'll put on my infrastructure hat at this point, is where the data comes in, where the data comes out. This is not a museum system, but this is something that I have a feeling a lot of us spend a good bit of time with. This is what a lot of our collections management systems might look like, or at least feel like. Born in the 1990s, perhaps, not updated for years, hard to get data in, especially when we're talking about the rich wealth of data that we want to bring in, how our objects are being used, 3D data, the new ways we're thinking about collections. And it's also hard to get data out of these systems. It's a challenge, certainly one that we've come up against at the Williams College Museum of Art. So this is, in a sense, Chip Clark is looking at perhaps an older model, still a very generous model. We see here especially the vibrant blue butterflies. This is Chip trying to make the most of an analog situation, wishing you were here with him in storage, trying to make that experience available to you. Chip Clark for a long time was resistant to digital, from what I understand. He passed away in 2010. In the years before that, he came around. He saw the opportunities in digital photography, certainly. This is the common eastern firefly, Photinus pyralis. I found this image in the Smithsonian Learning Lab website. It comes from the National Museum of Natural History's collection. This is, in a sense, the emblematic of the physical, the part of that Chip Clark experience that is offered up. So often, and up to this point, when we thought of engagement, we've thought about bringing people to the museum to experience this physical collection object, this artifact perhaps, this amazing collection storage opportunity. And we've channeled all of our activities into this. Social media even, you see this every so often, where a post is made to send people to the museum so that they can have a collection experience. And I wonder if there's a new model afoot. And this is a model that we're thinking of. I wonder if Chip's vision of a collection might not just be a physical model, but if these collections in digital form might actually circulate. They might take to digital networks directly, so that a physical intervention is not needed. This is a kind of a guiding vision for us. This is a photograph by Spencer Black, who I think took Chip's idea to the next level. So instead of laying out the collection before us with that welcoming hope that we might someday visit, without offering up that digitized surrogate, which is there for us to look at. This is a view of blue ghost fireflies in North Carolina. It shows not just the fireflies, but their movement. It traces how they're moving through a system. It traces a bit of the lives of the fireflies themselves. I imagine myself within this forest scene, looking at the lives of collection objects, how they're being used, how they're being offered up to others for use, and imagining how we might trace those uses and trace those objects, and imagining the new context that might arise from those uses and how we might express that to others as well. And I'm going to leave with this, because I love that Secretary Bunch tweeted this as well. I also want the Smithsonian to be a place that's as much about today and tomorrow as it is about yesterday. We have to think about 35 million people who visit every year, but we also have to remember the many people who will never get there. How do we bring the Smithsonian to them? I wonder if this vision of capturing the traces of collections, this is something that's come up today as well. Capturing the activity of teachers using collections, incorporating that into our work and sharing it back out. I wonder if that might be a vision for the future. Thank you very much. Sure.
Any questions for Chad? No? I'll start with one, if I may. I really love how you talk about the program you have where these students can have a work of art in their dorm room, and then they write a letter or some kind of narrative about the impact of that work and where they want it to go, and then you save that, and then it gets incorporated. Do you do the same thing with the courses that instructors are using the works for? Do you save what they're doing?
Yes, indeed. In fact, we are standardizing a process around that, such that that knowledge, that context, that data is then incorporated into things like the Collection Explorer that you saw a little bit of. We imagine that neuroscience professor, as she is looking to incorporate new works of art into our course, might see the works of art that have been used by other science professors, to look through the lens of how a work of art has been used, to be able to better use it the next time around. So yes, that academic course data is gold to us. And the flip side of that, too, is every time a faculty member uses that set, those works of art, that means those students are using those works of art as well. And so the student-generated context is also valuable.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation. I always knew that Williams College offered art classes from all disciplinary perspectives, and you had an example of a neuroscience professor who does use art. But I was wondering, how does it happen? Is it something that you make an outreach to the neuroscientist, or when they're hired, they come with the understanding that they are encouraged to use art in their teaching? So could you comment and expand a little bit on that?
Certainly, certainly. It's an ongoing challenge. We are very fortunate in that Williams has a reputation for the arts, and the art museum in particular is well loved, and offers a place for collaboration. And a place for convening to bring people together, and also a public outlet. These are all things that we can offer a faculty member. So that computer science class, for instance, the professor had some ideas about how best to teach computer science to reinforce this idea of the value of creative thinking and trial and error. But also the value of liberal arts thinking and ethics within that computer science class. And so by partnering with the museum, he was able to infuse the class with some of those ideas, and give students who may not have been science students an object-based connection to the arts at Williams.
Thank you.
Just another, oh, sorry, I don't mean to.
Thank you. I'm just preoccupied with browse, have been my whole career as a librarian. Embedding that into some sort of an algorithm, it calls for some level of classification. So, with so much emphasis put upon search, or as a librarian engaged with computer scientists, when we said, this obsession that we have about query and retrieval, and so much energy and effort into these kinds of interfaces to achieve that kind of finding experience, browse is something deeply different. So I guess I'm wondering about the ways that you were preoccupied with browse, and then how you expressed it formally in this system. How would you distinguish it from search, and how important is that to your community?
Right. For our community, I would certainly say both are important. We have, we will always be a partner to our art history department. We realized very early on that keyword search, in terms of our data, and even in terms of our expertise, an art museum is predominantly art historians. And so the way we think about objects, the way we classify objects, the metadata we use is particular to art history. And so it's hard to expect a geosciences professor to be able to know the types of terms to search for within an art history collection. And so knowing that is when we turn to browse, to try to take advantage of the capacity, especially with the interfaces that people are most familiar with, to scan through hundreds of images, to see an image that might show a kernel of possibility for use, and then to see the images around it that might look like that image. We've found it even, and this is just a prototype, to be very useful, especially to non-specialists. But we're also seeing it to be very useful for our curators who haven't seen some of these connections before and are seeing the collection, which they've known in their mind for years, in a new way, and from a new perspective.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chad. That was a very good presentation. I was just going to jump on that and say how we think about the difference between search and browse is like what you've said, but also that browsing is about democratizing the collection in multiple ways, and so that it just, surprises come up, and through different tools, you can democratize it, and you will fall into things and dive deeper. And search, we spend a lot of energy in not only helping it so terms we think people will search for and that we know people can't spell, and we weight things so things come to the top that we think they're, we spend a lot of energy in those algorithms, and it's a completely different way of thinking. And yeah, they cross over, and sometimes you'll go from searching into browsing just from if the tool sets are integrated. So I like how you guys are thinking that. That's how I think about it.
And even the technology behind crosses over too as well, right? So the sorts of machine learning and artificial intelligence can be super helpful for searching as well as browse. Yeah, it's been a fun ride to imagine how browsing the collection like that can open up avenues for exploration.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Chad, and I'd ask everybody to thank our keynote as well one last time. Thank you. That's the end of the program for today, and I would thank you all for coming and remind those of you who are coming back tomorrow that we start at 9 a.m. sharp. And if you have any questions on your way out, please let us know at the registration desk. Thank you.
I'd like to. It's heavy. Maybe we can lock it up. Okay. Make sure this is on.